Welcome to the Monday Minute of the Hunt Backcountry podcast. These are shorter and more informal episodes where we answer your listener questions. Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Had a fun, productive weekend. We're moving here to the new house in 3 weeks, so there was lots of cleaning and organizing and packing up stuff over the weekend.
The amount of stuff you accumulate, especially with kids at your age,
Oh my
is
dude.
pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, we had 3 trips to the freaking Goodwill donating stuff, just toys and old clothes and holy cow.
Yeah.
Definitely a Trish and I were like, we're gonna have like a no with like our grandmas and just birthdays and stuff like that, man. Like no plastic anymore, no plastic toys. Like the amount of toys that our kids had got, and they play with for 5 minutes and then gets thrown in the corner of a closet and then never touched again. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, and then even there's an interesting observation of like the kids went actually to my mom's house Friday night, and then when they got back here Saturday night, we had like gone through the whole toy. We have a toy room kind of downstairs. It's well, it was an office that got morphed into a toy room. And by the time we got rid of like 80% of the toys, and they thought it was so awesome. Like they were playing with toy, like some of these like quality toys that have just been my
Yeah.
son hasn't seen in 2 years because they've been buried under other things. Um, yeah, just simplifying it was, I think it's like much better for them, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's 3 toys to play with. I'm gonna pick one. Yeah.
This is an unintended segue because I didn't know that that was happening. But it makes me think of spring cleaning, getting rid of stuff, makes me think of the concept of a garage sale, which I think we've mentioned on the podcast, but is more official that EXO is going to have kind of a garage sale and open house May, right?
Yep. Yeah, we put it on the calendar Saturday, May 10th.
Yeah.
And more of a garage sale. We just get between I guess we're between blemishes or like kind of factory seconds to returns. That stuff just kind of piles up. So we have quite a few boxes full of just packs and parts. And I know there's like a pile of Nalgene holders that where they sewed the collar too tight on them that I'm like, man, we're just gonna give these away. People can, I don't know, figure out how to use for them. Cut off the top and use as a bugle holder or something. We
Hmm.
got all sorts of stuff, and then we'll try to make it more of a grand opening ish party, if you want to call it that. Since we moved to the new place last September, and have some other of our local companies out there, and have some. Last year when we did the garage sale, we had food and beer and drinks and stuff for the kids, and I don't know. We're trying to figure it out, make it a fun. Come hang out for 2, 3 hours.
Well, more to come. We'll figure out more details and share more info, but at least wanted to put that date out there as well. And another unintended segue, but great job, Steve. You mentioned Nalgene holders.
Yeah,
We have
I'm on
a brand new
a
one. I
roll.
mean, you were crushing it today.
Yeah, we did 48-ounce Nalgene holder. So when we first came out with the K4 Nalgene, it just fits your standard 32-ounce Nalgene bottle. And I don't think I realized how much of a following that the larger 48-ounce one had. Definitely over since 2023, there's been lots of requests to do it. Actually built 5 or 6 of them. It's been over a year now. And quite a while ago, ran it on my training pack. I think I gave you one. I can't remember how many
Hmm.
were out there. I got all 5 or 6 of them are out there somewhere. Um, but just ran them for a year. Meant to do it last year and just kind of got busy with all the other projects we had going on last year. And so it's kind of on the list to release this year. And yeah, we're just doing a limited run of it. It's not, there's no intentions to have it be a stock item because I don't think the demand is high enough to justify that. But right now, we just started taking orders last night and we're going to run it for about a week. And then we have everything queued up, ready to go with our production to as soon as we shut off the orders, like, all right, we know exactly how many to produce and just get it rolling and make them as fast as we can. So they should, run through this. We kind of said through this weekend. We're just going to Friday night or probably run it through Sunday or something like that and shut it off. And then next a week from today, Monday morning next week, get rolling on production, and they would take, I don't know, probably we're saying 3 to 4 weeks. It's probably less than 3 weeks, but we just always like to um,
Hmm.
over over promise, under deliver. The opposite
Exact
of
opposite of that. Yeah.
that. uh, yeah, so they'll ship out pretty quick to guys. Get them so you can start using them for spring bear. And I really like for summer training hikes. It's an extra 16 ounces of water in there on those. I really enjoyed having that last year on some of those 100-degree days. Getting training, getting ready for the caribou and moose hunts and stuff like that. And to me, it's a little. It's a if you run that 48-ounce one in a regular Nalgene holder, it sits pretty high. It's just kind of annoying. It just bumps into your elbow. Um, so this one, I moved the mounting point so it sits down a little bit lower. The downside is it's sitting down lower. So when you're kind of hunting, you're setting the pack down on the ground. You can't just set it like straight down because it's all the weight is sitting right on that Nalgene at first. So you kind of got to set it down on its side. So to me, it's a great certain applications thing, but there's the 32-ounce regular one's a better kind of all around fit. But again, there's guys who really like this 48-ounce one and just trying to one of those deals where we're certainly paying attention and listening to what customers want, and there's enough requests for it that like, all right, we'll make this happen.
It hasn't come up a lot, but definitely I would anticipate some questions on why can't you just run a 48-ounce Nalgene in the standard Nalgene holder, which you can. Two big things. One is, like you said, changing the mounting point, dropping the bottle reduces interference with your arm movement and then the bottle itself, just because that bottle's long. And the other, like more subtle, but I think somewhat practical benefit as well, is just you have full coverage of the bottle. And with full coverage for
Hmm.
us, that means also more insulative value just with the foam that
Yeah.
we use. So it's kind of a double win if you want to have, a more optimized, more ideal solution for the 48 ounce Nalgene, even though you could just drop a bottle in that standard holder. There was gosh, I'm terrible at time because time is moving so fast, but call it a week-ish ago, we found out, Steve, that there's this little podcast called the Joe Rogan podcast, and they happened to mention our packs. And it was pretty cool. Joe, they were talking with a comedian and talking about hunting, and then Joe was explaining to this comedian a little bit on the work kind of began. He wasn't using these words, but the work begins when you kill something and now you have to pack it out. And then Joe kind of mentioned how guys carry animals on their back. And then he said something about, well, there's these really crazy guys who go do this on public land and like have to carry things really a long ways. And was trying to explain to this comedian, like, what's an example of a pack? Like, let me show you. And it was cool to see him like kind of top of mind. He mentioned EXO, and then on the screen, like they do, they start searching for stuff online and showing some stuff. So it was cool to hear Joe Rogan talk about our packs, kind of show a few quick images, and just kind of have that come up in that conversation very organically. And then yeah, I don't know how it spread, or I know I first heard it from Jake. Like Jake,
Hmm.
I don't know how if he heard it or somebody sent it to him, but it was just cool. It was a cool moment to just
Yeah.
kind of share in for sure.
Yeah, it was super cool. Um, he actually ordered a pack from us, just no communication, nothing. Just an order came through for Joseph Rogan and shipping to Texas. And that was back in December of last year. And
Yeah.
messaged back and forth with him a little bit. And yeah, he's uh, wearing the pack. It's cool. It's freaking awesome.
Well, I between tornadoes and some other things, Steve had a pretty eventful weekend. Was able to go out. I think I mentioned this that a buddy threw an invite to me. He was celebrating his birthday and he wanted to go do a long hike for his birthday. He invited a few guys, including me, and his plan was to start at midnight and try and get in 30-ish miles. He's turning 33. He was pushing for that. Long story short, we ended up having massive storms and tornadoes and hail and stuff in our area that Friday night. We were supposed to start, the start got delayed. But long story short, we ended up hiking 30 miles, starting at roughly midnight on Friday. So going into it with no sleep, going all through the night. And then it was interesting how the storms affected things. We were in standing water at times. We were crossing what isn't normally creeks that were massively blown out and like above the knee. So it just added a fun, wild element to it. And it was great death hike training, that's for sure. Between not only moving and just time on your feet, but then kind of doing that with, in this case, no sleep. And what on the death hike will be very little sleep and some time in the dark and everything. And we were chatting before we started recording, Steve, how it was I don't know, it was like enlightening for me to see guys. There ended up only being three of us. There was gonna be a few more initially, but with the storms and everything else, some guys had to legit back out. People didn't have power, had house damage, all kinds of stuff. But it was it was a good hike for me, and I'm not trying to like say this in a oh look at me, I'm tough way. But I will say for the other two guys I was with, it was like a legit full on death hike, meaning they went longer mileage wise and time wise. It was more distance than they had ever done. And then you add in this element of doing it overnight, which is something they had never done. And then you add in this element of the weather and dealing with just, I mean, we had to cross a bunch of stuff. We crossed on logs across ravines. We crossed through way more water than expected. It was unlike anything they had ever done. And it was just really cool to kind of be a part of that and witness that and see those guys, you know, kind of push their limits. And it really was a death hike for them in a great way. And I joked with them once because they both mentioned at separate times, like, oh, this is now the longest like hike or run or anything that we've ever done. And we still had like hours to go. And so I would occasionally remind them and just joke with them, like, dude, every step is a PR. Like, keep going because every step is a PR. And it
Mm,
was a super cool thing to experience and be part of. Like, it was one, just selfishly, I enjoyed the heck out of it. But it was just cool to be along with guys and do that. So we've talked before about when listeners ask us about the death hike, like, hey, go make your own death hike. And it doesn't have to look like what we do, but grab a couple buddies and go do it. And this was just a perfect example of that. It wasn't even my idea. My buddy Luke just grabbed a few guys and was like, hey, let's go meet here at midnight and hike through the night and see how many miles we can get. And that's what you gain by doing that is so dang valuable. So I just wanted to share it to encourage more listeners to go do something like that. It was cool.
yeah. Yeah, make it, I don't know, if the concept of going at midnight and hiking 10 miles sounds insane to you, um, okay, just go do 5 miles. And I guarantee you, the second you're done with that, you're like, in 3 weeks, I'm going to go do 10 miles.
Hmm.
Um, like it just, if you're kind of, timid about it, just start with something you think is kind of like, okay, I don't think I could do that, but you know, make it so it's like attainable, and then you're going to do it. You're going to crush it and want to do more.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I mean, you were telling me the story before the podcast, and it's, um, what those guys got to experience is, I don't want to sound like I'm embellishing or exaggerating here, but it's truly life changing.
Yeah, I think so. I think they would say
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's as weird, like as a random Friday night, you went on a hike, but I guarantee you that for years they're going to look back at that. And not only because doing that, but I think what happens is you do something like that and it unlocks something in you, whether it's mental or physical, but you just realize, like, oh, I'm capable of more than I thought.
Yeah.
And
That's
then,
where
yeah,
the life changing part happens, I think. Like,
yeah,
whoa, all these things, like, you just start taking that, like, where else am I in my life am I putting barriers and roadblocks in front of me because I don't think something's possible? You just
hmm,
start thinking about things differently. And it's just such an easy, great way. I mean, yeah, a great way is a metaphor for other things in your life of like, okay, I'm going to do this. What's the plan? How do I execute it? You start training, you get ready, you study your nutrition, you look for find the right pair of shoes and backpack that you need, and then you go execute it. Like a little bit of planning and execution, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that was awesome.
yeah.
Opens your eyes.
Let's dive into a listener question. This one is a follow-up from our recent Bivy episode, which I will say I love that podcast because we had so many listener questions that we made a part of the podcast itself, which was really cool. We haven't had many follow-up questions, which I think is a great thing because I hope that speaks to because we answered listener questions as part of the podcast, we didn't leave people without too much of the info that they wanted to know about, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So we've gotten a
Hmm.
lot of great feedback on that podcast for sure and great comments, just not a lot of follow-up questions, which I kind of see as a win. But Max wrote in with this question. I think it's worth addressing. He said, I just finished the Bivy hunting episode. Excellent work as always. Thank you for taking the time to share those podcasts. He said, I use a catabatic Bivy last year along with a Seek Outside DST tarp. I have a dumb question, but have to ask. When you pair the Bivy with a shelter of any kind, are you just letting the Bivy rest on your face? Or as you discussed, they can be guyed out typically, and I prefer this since it's more comfortable for me. But I find it difficult to get the Bivy off my face when I am under the tarp. And I imagine it would be impossible to do inside of a tent shell. There's no room for the trekking poles or something else to connect to when using it under the shelter. I'm guessing I just need to get used to it, talking about the netting on your face, but I'm curious if there is a hack that I'm missing. So, Steve, in the podcast, we talked about suspending the netting, getting it off your face. That could be tying it to trekking poles. I've used a tripod. I've suspended it to tree branches. There's a bunch of different things, but you get under your tarp or in a Hilleberg shell or a floorless teepee, and now what can you tie that out to? Is essentially what Max is asking. The first thing that came to mind is maybe nothing because maybe you don't actually have to close it. So if you inherently know, hey, I'm on into the fall at this point, bugs aren't a main concern. There's been so many nights I've used my bivy inside of a shell, but I actually haven't brought the netting over my face because I'm not necessarily concerned with having it over my face. I don't need the bug protection, for example. So that's number one is don't assume you always have to have it on there. Two, from here, I think you can go several different directions based on numerous variables of what type of shelter you're using, how it's built, and first of all, I think what it's built out of. One thing that came to mind is if you happen to be using like a DCF or Dyneema material shelter, there's some great options to just do stick-on attachment points. I'll leave links for these. They work fantastic for Cuban fiber, DCF, Dyneema, etc. Where you can just take these little patches, like see where you want a mounting location to be to tie your bivy to or to hook your bivy to, and put those inside of your tarp or your shelter. They work great. The problem becomes with you get into sil nylon, sil poly, those types of adhesive hooks that work well with Dyneema are not going to work here. That's where I think you run into a host of different options. There's kind of some ways to do it. You could take some silicone and try and kind of rig something yourself. I found an old video. It's kind of funny. It looks like it's shot in the 1990s almost of a guy who was essentially doing this idea. It's not something I've done, but I did see some folks talking about it online, reference it, say it worked well. Again, I'll leave a link to it just so you can check it out. I haven't used it, can't speak to it. You could maybe look for somebody near you who could sew something, so don't rule out that option. But really, it falls into just the shelter you're using and then getting creative with, some shelters have little, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a little storage area towards the top,
Mhm.
Steve, like a,
Yeah, a little gear loft thing.
yeah, a
Yeah.
gear loft, right? So can you repurpose something for this purpose? Is there some sort of other loop or something that already exists where you just kind of get creative? And one thing I wanted to bring up on this point I found really helpful is when tying out the bivy to whether it's in a shelter, tripod, trekking poles, all that stuff. I like to use a dynamic cordage, not something that's going to be static and hold a lot of tension. You want there to be some give so that if you're moving or the bivy moves and it's tied out to something, you're not like pulling your trekking poles down over your head, or you're not introducing a lot of tension because you don't need tension, you don't need weight bearing. You're just trying to get this mesh suspended, and obviously you don't need much resistance for that. So that's just another quick little tip I wanted to throw out there. Um, for that. So just get creative. If you have, again, Dyneema, carbon fiber, there's some great patch options with sil poly, sil nylon. Things get a little bit tougher. And then also just keep in mind, like, if you're already in a shelter and it's not bug season, maybe just leave the thing open and not actually worry about this issue. But anything else come to mind for you, Steve?
No, yeah, on the Hilleberg, um, that Anhan, like on the Alaska hunts last year, they just had a little there's little rings inside where the what the inner tent attaches to, and we were just running the shell. I just reach up and clip clip that Hyperlight Mountain Gear bivy to it. I had a little clip on there,
Hmm.
and yeah, same thing. The cord's a shock cord, right? So it's got some give. You're not when you roll, it's not like pulling down on the tent. If you roll over and actually kind of pull back down on that mesh, and works really well. And yeah, definitely, it's a new thing to me. I mean, it's been the last 2 to 3 years where I've started. Actually, I had a bivy sack. I think it started because I borrowed your enlightened equipment, and uh, and it is nice keeping that mesh off your face for bugs. Yeah, it's an upgrade to the bivy sack of the mesh laying on your face for sure.
Yep.
I did have there was one guy who commented. I don't know where I saw the comment. I was trying to find it, but I can't. Like he basically was like oh, Steve's an idiot. Like I can take my TP and pitch it wherever I want, and um, and it's remind like people don't be that guy. Like don't be denying facts. And like it's
Because
that this.
facts.
Well, I think people spend money on something and they get really defensive, or they really really like it and they get
Yeah.
defensive for they won't acknowledge its flaws.
Hmm. Or
And it
just
was just such a
limitations, not even flaws,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a limitation's a better way to put it. Like you know you're not going to pitch that on the side of the mountain tucked up into like next to a tree or something like that, right? Like just the nature of a teepee's walls and how gradually sloped out they are, like you can't tuck up into things. And so it's like, no, you're not going to pitch that. It's just factually not true. And don't, it just drives me nuts when people kind of like a lot on the much larger scale of the small caliber debate, right? Like people get so defensive and just don't understand. Just open your damn eyes is what I want to say. Like
Hmm.
and see the whole picture and not be so narrow-minded. And a lot of it is um, I think you spend money on something, so you just get defensive of it.
Hmm.
Like because you want to justify the money that you spent. Which, I get that. I mean, that's probably a human nature psychological thing, but just try to like, okay, there are limitations to this and just understand the pros and cons of everything and you just make better. I mean, you apply this to every aspect of life, but if you're just talking about hunting gear, you're just going to make better decisions and have better gear by critically thinking about things.
Yeah, I know the comment you're talking about, and he even said it was a two-man TP. And the way he phrased it was like, there's no, essentially, he didn't say these words, but he was phrasing like, hey, there's no limitation on footprint. And he referenced something about like, even in slopes, you only need a small
Uh,
footprint for your body, but you can actually set up this two-man TP on slopes and other things. Like, there's no limitation to it. But yeah, like, what about deadfall, brush, tree? Like, there's so many limitations to where a two-man TP can fit either maybe not permanently, right? Like anything's possible with enough work. But again, going back to like time, effort, and situational dynamics, like you can't put a two-man TP in a ton of places that you and I have slept.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
and they can be a great choice. It's not like I just it's not the best choice for the type of hunting we're doing by far.
Yep.
But the teepees with the wood stoves inside for you're going out to Colorado or Idaho or whatever. You're going on a week long elk hunt and you're like I have the advantage of most of my hunting here's at home and it's like the weather's just crap. Um, I go home.
You're soft, Steve.
Yeah, I'm soft. Because I know the hunting's gonna suck, right? And it's like wait for the storm to break and come back out when things get nicer and the animals start moving again. But if I guess I do take for granted of generally I can take any day off of work I want, right? So I'm not limited to even that was because I was had this. talking with Justin the other day in the office about this. I was like, well, I guess yeah, if you took this 3 days off of work and this is the only time you can get out and you're just gonna ride out the storm, then yeah, something like a teepee with a wood stove would be amazing. To if you're just gonna be stuck in it for a couple days and waiting for the storm to pass to stay warm and dry. But
Hmm.
um, just understand the pros and cons of everything, and um, I guess that's the message.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've spent a lot of nights in a Seek Outside Cimarron, especially years ago, but it was influenced by hunt style and hunt location. And I think the message here isn't that the two-man teepee or a Cimarron or anything of the sort's bad. It's just, again, Steve, acknowledge the limitations of it.
Yeah.
And another thing that we have the luxury of, not only like what you just talked about with, say, weather or choosing your time, another thing you and I have the luxury of is having options. So we're not
Mm.
trying to say, hey, here
Yeah.
is this shelter for everything, because we have the option to choose different shelters based on different hunts, for example. So yes, like each shelter is going to have limitations. A bivy is going to have some limitations. A two-man teepee is going to have some limitations. If you over time have a couple of options with shelter, and I really think you could do this really with two options. You can kind of cover a little bit of everything. But if you have a shelter for all of your hunting, you can't ignore the fact that you inherently have some limitations.
Yeah.
Not ones that can't be worked around, but there's limitations.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. This question came through from Carrie. I want to get into it a bit on this Monday Minute, but I will say, Steve, that this is a topic I want to do a video on, an article on, and dive deeper into. But wanted to kind of introduce the topic and talk through it a little bit kind of off the cuff. So Kerry wrote in, he said, I appreciate all the great content you guys are putting out and what EXO stands for. I bought a K4 3600 last year, thinking it would be mostly for 3 to 5 day trips and horseback hunts, which is a great choice, by the way. He then went on to say, this year I decided I'm going to do a solo 7 to 10 day early season sheep hunt in Alberta. I'm curious if you think it is possible to pull off a 7 to 10 day trip out of a 3600. And if so, how would you approach optimizing the pack's limited volume? He says, I run a gear list pretty similar to you guys. And specifically, what is on my mind is how I can reduce the bulk of food, as this always seems to take up so much space. Thank you for any thoughts and tips you can share. Again, that's from Carrie. Thanks for the question, Carrie. Steve, it made me immediately think of your 10-day sheep hunting
Hmm.
video, which is a resource we can point people to because you essentially packed for a 10-day sheep hunt in was that a 3200 back then? Was that K3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
K332.
So we'll leave a link to that. It's a little, I don't want to say outdated, but it's just a few years old. And it wasn't meant to just answer this question, but it's a good resource to check out. So I'll leave a link to that. Um, let's start here. Carrie in this says what's specific on his mind was reducing bulk of food. And I think that is a great place to start thinking about this question and how to get the most out of your pack space is optimizing food space. So what do you do there?
Yeah, if you go watch that video I did, yeah, that was in 2020, I think. But you just one, we always talk about every day is in its own bag of food bag. So I just take gallon Ziploc bags. I found on Amazon half-gallon Ziploc bags, and those work great. They're like completely full for me, but they work great. Um, and just I guess how I go about food, I don't have any problem with the monotony of eating the same thing every day. The only variance might be what my dehydrated meal is for dinner that night. But I'll just build one day out, make sure it's 3,000 to, 3,500 calories. And all obviously you're making good food decisions here of calorie, food that's at least 120 calories an ounce, and so that way your total weight and volume isn't too much. And build everything into a bag. I build one bag and then I just repeat that 9 times. I actually just leave. I'll put like I started making my own backcountry bars, right? So I'll just stack those all up, and then I'll build out a day, and then that way I just grab the piece and just lay it next to the one, and it just makes it really easy. I guess I should. I mean, it's really simple to do, but we could do a video on it at some point. Um, and build out my 10 days and then just get everything when I'm putting them in a Ziploc bag. I do this the night before the trip or a couple nights before the trip. I take my time, pack everything in there nicely. And then that half-gallon Ziploc bag folds into a nice little brick, right? And it's amazing how much less space that takes up than I remember hunting with Cody Kellum quite a few years back, and he just had all of his food thrown in a big duffel bag, and he just pulled it out, and it was this massive, like bag, and it's just because it was all just kind of laid in there like matchsticks, all these bars and whatnot, and it's amazing. Like if you just took your time, you could reduce that volume in half.
It's food
So
Tetris is what it is, and it's very
yeah,
effective.
yeah. And it's not like I'm spending a bunch of time doing this. It takes 15 minutes to pack all my food for a 10-day hunt once you have everything lined out. Um, so do that. That's a big one. The other one that especially something like this, if you really wanted to stretch a 3600 out on a 10-day trip, which can absolutely be done, um, the getting your dehydrated meals out of the bags and putting them into freezer Ziploc bags and just cooking them in those. You're gonna save um, probably 8 to 10 ounces of packaging weight and take out, I'd say, more than half of the volume of those. Like you're gonna take those 10 bags of dehydrated meals and cut them in half and save 8 to 10 ounces because the Ziploc weighs significantly less than just kind of your average packaging. Um, and I mean, they work. I'm sure there's some cancer-causing chemicals that you pour boiling water in those things, even though they say they're boil safe. That's
Yeah.
probably not good for you. But
And the
I think
freezer
on a
bag part is important as well, not just any standard storage bag when it comes to the boiling water.
yeah, so they're they would be labeled as like boil safe freezer bags. Um, but I'm sure there's still, it can't be good for you. But probably if you did it every day of the week for 5 years, then there'd be something there. But just to me though, a few random times a year you do, it's probably not too bad. So yeah, those two things there are huge. You can really, really drastically cut down your food. And when you're talking about 3 days versus 10 days, with the exception of maybe in like an extra pair of socks, my nothing in my gear list changes. The only difference between 3 days and 10 days is food. So it's really getting a pack to stretch out is like, okay, how can I efficiently pack my food? And that's it. So yeah, I mean, that video I did was fantastic. There's certainly other tips on not using stuff sacks, right? Like sleeping bags loose, sleeping pad. You do roll up tight, slide down in there. Even your tent. I don't use a stuff sack or put it in a bag. You can, your pack could be completely full, and if you just take the tent and start kind of sliding it down into corners, it works really well. And then
Hmm.
certainly on that. Like I did loaded up a 3200 for 10 days and the pack is annoyingly full. So, but every day it's getting smaller and smaller. And by day 3, day 4, all of a sudden it become like once you just start eating all that food, it just becomes easier and easier to pack every single day. So it's not while it's like a little, I would certainly like agree that it's going to be a little difficult. You just got to take a little bit extra time up front. It's not going to be that every day. It's getting easier. And I'm just a big, I know it's contrary to popular opinion if you jump on forums or whatever, but I'm a huge fan of running a smaller bag. Um, Weight distribution being the largest reason for that, right? Like you want to fill up the volume of the bag and have that weight distributed nice and vertically throughout the pack. If you take that same amount of gear that I can fit into a 3200 and dump it into a 7200 because that's what somebody said you needed for a 10-day hunt, generally that stuff's going to kind of sit in the bottom of the pack and just not carry as well. And you've got this bigger bag on your back that you kind of got to manage. And I don't know. It's just definitely there's a time and place for 7200. I mean, a late season 10-day hunt with bulky gear, you're hunting in a lot of snow. I certainly get it. But I just had a guy on Instagram message me. I think this was just yesterday. He wanted to do a 7-day sheep hunt, um, and he had bought a what did he buy? I think he was debating. He bought it. Oh, he had a K3 4800, and he said he
Mm.
went on a 3 day hunt and had that thing stuffed to the gills. So he's looking at getting a K4. He's like, I think I'm gonna need a 7200. And I was like, it's like, yeah. I mean, if you take your exact same packing style, a 5000 is not going to be enough if you were busting at the seams on 3 days and a 4800. So yeah, you're going to need a 7200. But I said, in all honesty, you need to really look at how you're packing, and you're probably just taking too much stuff with you. Um,
Hmm. I wonder in
like,
situations like that, because I'll have these conversations with people too, and they'll say like a 4800 is full, just to pick on this example. Like, is
mhm.
it though?
Yeah,
Because I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
gear like is going to expand and take up the volume of the pack, but it's not full. It looks full, it is full, but if you actually wanted to compress things and add more to it, you can keep adding to it. So it's inherently not full.
Yeah.
A few other things, not just on food, but that comes to mind with this topic. Obviously, it just comes into what gear you're bringing, not only how much gear you're bringing, but then, like you said, Steve, choices of gear on conditions, down versus synthetic, not only with sleep system, but with clothing, etc. And then kind of on this idea of it feels full versus it is full. When you're trying to maximize the volume of a pack, if you're not already loading via the roll top, I would highly recommend doing that. Um, I find it much more effective to get the full use out of the main bag, loading via the roll top versus just going through the front zipper. The front zipper, yes, I'll use to get things in and out, but when it is actually like, hey, I'm taking all of the things and getting them in my pack, I find it so much more effective to use that roll top. So if you haven't done that, definitely experiment with that. Um, and then yeah, just as you said, Steve, when you are fully maximizing space, and as you said, especially the first couple days, maybe it does feel like a bit of a chore because it can be. Is just it sounds very basic. Think through what you're putting where so that you don't need to dig through stuff to get to what you need. So, and this is
Yeah.
really a design philosophy in the bags, but we are trying to provide quick access and organized storage to the things you need throughout a hunt, throughout a day, so that you don't have to go into the main bag very much. But that's on us individually to put things in an accessible spot, right? So just working through that, like, oh man, my bag's full, my bag's tight. Now I got to get this, that, and the other thing. I mean, are you using the stretch pockets? Are you using the lid? Are you using the side pockets effectively for those specific things that you think you're going to need to get in and out? So just make sure that you're also doing that for sure.
Mhm.
Steve, I wanted to touch on just on this topic in general. It makes me think of, well, what about extra storage utilizing the load shelf? What about storing food, gear, whatever between the bag and the frame? So just want to touch on that. Like, it's totally doable, but if someone's going to do that, what would you say are good things to store there? And then what is the downside to actually taking this approach?
I don't have a problem with it. If you got a 3600 and you're trying to get to 10 days and you're going in and setting up a base camp, I don't have any issue. I mean, you're doing packing meat in reverse, right? Like you're putting something in the load shelf and hiking in there. I think if you wanted to hunt with camp off your back every single day, and you were like, you had 5, 6 days of food in there, so you're gonna have to just manage that load shelf for 5, 6 days. I think that would be like, okay, let's just jump up a bag size. But if you're just put the meat, not meat, your bags of food and lay it flat against the frame, sandwich that in between the bag and the frame, and hike in there, 5, 6, 10 miles, whatever, set up camp, and then you just leaving all the food there. Yeah, I don't have any issue with that at all.
And then just keep in mind, although you may be packing for a 7, 8, 9, 10 day hunt, what happens if you kill on day one or day two? And you're truly
Mhm.
at capacity. You needed the load shelf for gear, but now you have an animal down, and now you need the load shelf as well. So that may not be a
Yeah.
problem because maybe you're taking multiple trips, you have a bunch of time, but just keep in mind, like, hey, if you're relying on the load shelf to carry some sort of gear capacity, now you do happen to strike early, and now you need to also haul meat, and you maybe you're in a situation where you're trying to get a lot out at once. Like now you're kind of in a little bit of a pickle, but again, nothing that can't be worked
Yeah.
around by any means.
Yeah.
All right, one more. This happened to be on pack size, but kind of the inverse. Chris wrote in and says, I was watching the moose hunt videos, which are great, by the way, and was surprised to see the size of the packs the guys were wearing on their day hunts. The packs still looked relatively full for a day hunt, even without the camp items such as tent, sleeping pad, quilt, etc. Maybe that's just a necessity of hunting in Alaska and all the additional gear that's needed, such as waders or other items. But could you run through what was in your day packs? So Chris is essentially asking, like, man, those packs look pretty full for being run around for a day away from camp on the moose hunt. Like, what's in them?
Yeah. So if you watch the video, we hike in with these. I think there's one clip where like I've never had so much crap strapped to the outside of my pack because I did have. We were going in for um, 6 days and I think 5 days of food. I can't remember. Um, but we did. There was a lot of stuff, and I knew we were going to go set up base camp, so I probably had an extra, I don't know, 5 to 8 pounds of stuff that I wouldn't be packing on a backpack hunt, right? Where I'm physically packing up and taking camp with me every day. And then we had the bear fence and a bunch of extra stuff. So that by the time I loaded up the pack with all that extra stuff, and then I was strapping the my gun, the pack raft, the paddle, my Crocs. I had so much crap strapped to the outside of the pack that it was pretty ridiculous. Um, but yeah, we hiked in there and then set up base camp, and then from there just day hunting. I think that's where you take, everything's just thrown in the pack, right? That we were out there day hunting with. Certainly, I don't think well, no, there's certainly days I had waders. So I mean, you've got waders, Crocs, jet oil, puffy jacket. I packed this camp chair the whole time. Your food bag for the day. Um, I think I said, yeah, if you got your rain jacket, rain pants. I mean, there's just a lot of kind of loose, bulky items that would maybe just kind of looked big on camera, but the pack wasn't actually like that heavy or anything like that. Um,
Hmm.
I know had that giant bull magnet. What's that moose call, mate? I think that's what it is.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that giant moose call I would sometimes stuff in the bag. So I'm sure it just on video looked, full, but it certainly wasn't. Like I said, it was just running a 3600.
They always say the camera adds 10 pounds. I guess that's true to the
Yeah.
pack.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, we will wrap it there for today, guys. We got more listener questions to get into next week, but more are always welcome. So send us an email to podcast@exomountgear.com if there's a question you have for us. There's a lot more coming just on the podcast, new video stuff, some new product stuff as well. We got the new Nalgenes right now. We're working on new logo gear. So there's a lot going on, a lot coming soon. In addition to just following the podcast or subscribing to that, the best thing you can do to make sure you don't miss kind of any updates is just sign up for our emails, which you can do at exomountgear.com/newsletter. And then we're also picking from the email list a new subscriber to win a K4 pack. And we're going to pick that at the first of the month. So if you're not already on the list, not only will you get those updates from us, but you'll be entered into that giveaway automatically. So we'll have a link for that. If you guys want to sign up, check it out. Otherwise, be sure to just come on back for the next episode. We'll have a full length episode on Wednesday and then the next Monday Minute with your questions on Monday. Appreciate all the support, and we'll talk to you soon.